We are here to talk to you, to our valuable guidance counselors. And this is a really kind of different year. Obviously, normally we'd be on campus right now. I'm having what I would call the best breakfast of the year. And I know you're normally here for the food, but also here for the company. And so what we'll be able to do this year is organize a series of guidance forums to help you stay in the loop, help you keep informed, and also, more importantly, help us answer the questions that you may have during this time of year. Now, before we start with the official guidance forum, I'd like to acknowledge that Carleton University is located on the traditional unceded territories of the Algonquin Nation. Last spring, we officially launched Kinamagawin, which is our call to action. So it's a new Indigenous strategy with 41 different calls to action to ensure that we can make our community as welcoming as possible. Now, Kinamagawin means learning together, and this is what this morning is all about. It's all about us learning as a collective and hearing from us and also from you. Now, I should mention that this session is going to be recorded, so just please take note of that happening. Now, again, like I said, today is the first of a series of guidance forums. Today's session is going to be a really cool one. We have the Director of Admission Services, Jen Sugar, here to give you guys the kind of the best, the latest, the greatest up-to-date information on all things admissions at Carleton University. Now, during Jen's talk, if you have any questions that come up, I would encourage you to utilize the chat function because it's a really great way for us to collect your questions. And at the end of Jen's conversation or update, we'll look at those questions and address those at that time. Following Jen's info or update, we're going to have a 15 to 20 minute Q&A session, a live Q&A session. And what you're able to do if you want to ask a question or share some thoughts is to utilize the hands function. So there's a kind of a hand available on our Microsoft Teams at the top right corner. If you see that hand and you want to ask a question during our Q&A, just click on that function. I'll look for your name. And when I say that you are kind of free to ask your question, then please do so. And once you've asked your question, please remember to put your hand down, unless you have, of course, a follow-up question. And then we'll wrap things up with a bit of a preview of what we have in store for our future guidance forums. Okay, so I think I've talked enough. I've said too much, perhaps, and I hopefully you're ready and excited to hear from the person you were here to see, the one, the only Jen Sugar. Jen, the floor is yours.
Thanks, and good morning, everybody. It's so awesome to be actually doing this guidance breakfast or a guidance forum in a different format. It's just wonderful that we're able to still gather and share some information with you, even though it's in a virtual format. So what I'm planning to do this morning is I'm planning just to kind of give a little bit of an update. Talk a little bit about some of the things that we know for this cycle, some of the things that we know in terms of how we'll be making offers of admission, because I know that's a lot of the questions that are coming forward from both students and guidance counselors. And so we'll talk a little bit about that.
J'écoute le forum de Carleton, si t'es intéressé.
Je ne peux pas aujourd'hui, que j'ai des réunions virtuelles avec des élèves.
Jen, if I just jump in here, I should have mentioned, if you don't mind, while we are kind of going with the morning, if you can keep your mute button on, unless you have, of course, something to share, then you definitely can obviously unmute. But during kind of the update, if you don't mind having that mute button on. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan. So what we're going to do this morning is I'm going to go through a few different things just to kind of give an outline of what we know. But I'm going to leave the vast majority of the time for questions, because I know that you all do have questions about, individual things that have come up or particular situations that that you're wondering about. So let's get right into it. And what I'm going to start by talking about is I'm going to start a little bit about talking a little bit about how the quadmester and the octomester system are going to impact how we receive grades and how we make offers of admission. And I just want to say that, you know, aside from the term social distancing, I think octomester is one of the best words to come out of this new COVID world. And I just I laugh every time I hear it, because every time someone says octomester, you know, I think about I think about this. And I'll put a little picture in to the meeting chat for you, because to me it's just hilarious. For those of you who don't know who that is, that's Dr. Octopus from the Spider-Man comics. So every time someone says octomester, I literally think of this guy. So so when we start talking about the octomester and the quadmester system and how we're going to receive grades, in essence, because of the way Carleton University has always made offers of admission, not much is going to change in terms of how we make offers of admission. So in the past, we've always used a combination of grade 11 and grade 12 grades as they've been available. And as we receive grades from the Ontario University Application Centre, we use grade 11 and grade 12 grades combined. And we combine them in order to create admission averages. And then as soon as we can make an offer to a student, we do. So we do what is called rolling offers of admission. And so for us, when we receive grades, we kind of look through and we see if the student has the correct prerequisites and if they have the correct average. And if they do, then we make them an offer of admission. For those of you who are familiar with how we've made offers in the past, you'll know that in November, many students will apply in November, typically, and usually in a regular year, the only grades that we would have for students at that point would be grade 11 grades. Well, of course, with the new system, we'll already have some completed grade 12 grades for students, because they will have completed some courses, whether or not they're in the octomester or whether they're doing the quadmester system. And so when we receive that first grade distribution in November, which is going to be somewhere around the 20th, we're already going to have some grade 12 grades for students, and we're going to have their completed grade 11 grades. So the way this is going to work for us is we're basically going to use everything that we have at each of those times. And so we're anticipating receiving grades from the UAC in November, in February, in April, and then at the end of the year in July. And so we will basically continue to do what we've always done and make rolling offers of admission based on the grades that we have. What it means, though, for us is that, again, for those of you who are familiar with how this normally works, normally in the April grade distribution, we would receive midterm grade 12 grades for students at that point. And so we would have completed first term grades for students, and we would have midterm second term grades for those students. And so at that point, we wouldn't really look at the grade 11 grades anymore. And that's in a typical year. This year, though, because we're only going to be receiving final grades for students at each of those grade distributions, we're going to be using grade 11 grades in the mix for a lot longer than we normally would, because for students who are completing their last two courses in that last quadmester, we're not going to have some of their grade 12 grades, and so we may need to go back and look at some of those grade 11 grades in order to fill in what we need for the admission average. But basically, the overall sort of process is still going to be the same. It's still going to be rolling offers of admission. We're still going to be using a combination of grade 11 and grade 12 grades. The only difference is that because of the way we're going to be receiving grades, we're going to be using grade 11 grades for a lot longer than we normally would. So that kind of gives you a rough outline of that. One of the other questions that we've received is about averages and about which averages we'll be using. So the Viewbook is an excellent guide for the averages that we will be using, and you can use those even with everything that's going on. Those averages are still an excellent guide for what we need in order for students to get into those programs. What I usually do is, if I'm advising students, you'll see in our view book, you'll see that there's a minimum average that students need in order to apply. There's sort of a minimum cutoff range. So for those of you who do have a view book, if you look on pages 72, 73 and beyond, you'll see in the chart that there's a minimum average for students to apply. But then what we've also done this year is we've given you, or given students, the incoming class average. So when you see that, so that's the incoming class average for 2019. So it gives you an idea of, this is the minimum average that you need to apply, but this was the average that most of the students who got into that program actually had. And so some students find that comforting to be able to sort of look at that and see that information. But usually what I say to students is, if they want to make sure that they're in a good position to apply and to get into the program that they want, when they look at that minimum cutoff range, just shoot for the top of it. Just shoot for the top of the range, and that way they're putting themselves in a good position in terms of their averages. The other thing that I'll say about averages is that we calculate two averages for students. We calculate an overall average based on their 6 courses, and so, like I said, those are going to be a combination of grade 11 and grade 12 throughout most of the cycle. But we also calculate a prerequisite average. And so the prerequisite average is another average that we calculate using the courses that are the prerequisites for the program. So that can be anywhere from one course for a student who's applying to the Bachelor of Arts. The prerequisite average might just be calculated on English, or it could be as many as 4 courses. So for students who are applying to the Bachelor of Engineering, there are 4 prerequisite courses that are required. So we're calculating another average there. And what we say to students is we give them the same advice, is that they should be shooting for the top of that range with their prerequisite courses as well, so that the average on those 2 or 3 or 4 prerequisite courses matches the top end of the averages.
Why can't I hear Jen?
What's that? Sorry?
I have the link, but I can't listen to her.
Oh.
I have the link.
Okay, to the guidance, you have the link to the view book, but you can't hear anything. Oh, there we go. All right, some problem solving happening in the chat. That's great. Okay, so I'm just going to keep going though. So in terms of averages, so that gives you an idea with averages and so on. We have had some questions about sort of the future state of what fall 2021 is going to look like. And I have to say that I barely know what January 2021 is going to look like. So some of those questions are really hard to answer. I can answer some things. So for example, if you look at what we're doing with our offers, so our offers, we're trying to keep everything consistent. We're making offers with guaranteed res for students who are interested in living in residence, with the assumption that hopefully, fingers crossed, by fall 2021, we will all be able to live in real life without masks. Obviously, we will pivot, we will change, we will move things around as required, just like we did this year, as public health guidelines kind of evolve and as things change. And so, but right now we're living in a hopeful world where fall 2021 is as normal as possible. But with that said, one of the things we're also trying to do is keep things as consistent as possible for students. So we're trying not to change too many dates, too many deadlines, too many processes. We're trying as a sector. So when I talk to my colleagues around Ontario, we're trying as a sector to keep the deadlines the same, keep the response date the same, keep everything the same, just to kind of keep people moving in that with that same flow that everyone is used to. So there still is a mid-January deadline for students to submit their application. The June 1st response deadline still is there. You know, universities will still be asking for answers and for res deposits and for things as they normally would, because we find that actually keeping things that consistent in that way really helped people this past year. And when we go off and change too many things, it actually makes it harder for students. And it's easier for them to have consistent deadlines, and it's easier for you to have consistent deadlines as well. So that's a little bit of that. I think a lot of grade 12 students are sort of, they're worried right now because it's the beginning of the year. They're worried right now about questions of what if I do badly, and you know, what if my grades are low, and so on. And what we've been saying to students is what we say to students all the time when they're worried about these things. We're saying, do your best. Do your best. We know this is a weird situation, but we also know that the guidance counselors and the teachers and everyone in the high schools is there to help the students. They're there to help them work through this strange time, to help them learn and to help them be evaluated and to help them get the content that they need, even though we're learning in this weird way. And so what we're saying to students is, do your best. Use the resources that are available to you, and you know, and let the process unfold, because there's no sense in having, you know, students trying to deal with what if, you know, what if I don't do this, or what if I don't do that. We can deal with those things as we go through the year, but we really want students just to do their best and concentrate on doing well within their courses as well as they can, so that they can set themselves up for success when they're coming to university in fall of 2021. So I think that's a little bit of a rundown. I'm going to stop so that we make sure that we have enough time for questions, and I'm going to let Stanley kind of deal with the questions and sort of call on you and kind of manage the chat as well. So.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jen, for that update. So like Jen mentioned, we're now ready for the Q&A portion. So what you're able to do, there are two kind of options. One is to type in your question in the chat, and then we'll read it out to Jen and have Jen hopefully answer it. And then you can also raise your hand. I see that Jenny Claude Jour has raised their hand. And so you'll be able to ask your question. And then once you've got your question answered, you can take your hand down. So Jenny Claude, the floor is yours.
Hi, thank you very much. My question pertains to the quadmesters and the offers that you're going to be submitting for the deadline in June. Mm-hmm. So for students, for instance, who don't have because you're going to be using grade 11 grades, obviously you won't have the grade 12 grades for the last two courses. Are you going to be refusing anyone June 1st if they don't have the cutoff grade?
No. So we're gonna, we're not in a situation where we often will close programs that early. And so no, that will not be a thing for us. And so we know, I think your question sort of is, what if the course that we're waiting for is, let's say, a calculus and vectors course that's in the last quadmester, and what we're doing is we're going back and we're dipping into that grade 11 math as a substitute, as a stand-in, until we get that grade. But what if that grade 11 math is kind of not as good, but the student is really counting on that calculus and vectors grade? We'll wait for that. So yeah, no, that's fine.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome. I know this is such a weird time for students.
Jen, we have a question in the chat from Sarah, and Sarah asks, the grade 11s are also concerned about the impact of the unusual school year, both on their learning and their important university application grades. So maybe you can touch a bit more about the grade 11s and how that might impact them.
Yeah, so we're hearing actually two sort of different things, and it depends on who you talk to. It's very interesting. One of the questions that we often get is, what is Carleton going to do with the grade 11 grades, since we know that all the grade 11 grades during COVID were wildly inflated And so what are you going to do about that? And then the other question we get is, what is Carleton going to do with the grade 11 grades, since we know that they're all terrible because of COVID? And so I think there's probably a bit of a mishmash of grades out there. And so, you know, with most of our programs, there is sort of an average range that we look at. And so I think, you know, what we saw with most of the students that we talked to coming through the system is that the good students were still good students, quote, and the middle of the road students were still middle of the road students. So, you know, we had students, so for example, where if you have a student who's normally mid 80s, mid to high 80s, you know, you might have had a student who normally in great circumstances might have ended up with like an 88 or a 90 average, and that student might have ended up with something like an 85, 87. That type of shift isn't going to make that big of a difference for us. And so, you know, we're still able to consider students in a lot of different brackets. So I think there's probably a little bit of both things out there, cases where students maybe didn't do as well as they wanted and cases where grades might have been inflated. But in essence, where we're at is that we have no choice really but to take the grades at face value. And so that's what we'll be doing, was we'll be looking at the grades at face value. We don't really have any kind of fair or equitable mechanism to adjust any of the averages. There's no way for us to do that in any kind of fair way whatsoever.
Awesome. Thank you for that question, Sarah. Shori has their hand up. So Shori, go ahead. Okay, it looks like Shori's hand went down. So maybe the question was answered by Sarah's question, which is awesome. So the floor is still open, folks. If you have any questions like that, ask Jen, you can definitely either raise your hand or type it into the chat. And while we're waiting for more questions, I'll take the opportunity to promote our future Guidance Forum meetings, because again, this is the first in a series of Friday mornings that we want to spend with you. And so next Friday, October 23rd, we're going to be sponsoring or promoting the Enriched Support Program. And that's brought to you from the Sprott School of Business. So there'll be a bit of a Sprott School of Business update as well. They'll be able to hear more about the Enriched Support Program and what that means to your students. On October 30th, the Paul Menton Center will be featured, and that's sponsored by the Faculty of Public Affairs. On November 6th, the Awards and Financial Aid Office will take center stage, and that's sponsored by the Faculty of Arts. On November 13th, our portfolio programs, so industrial design, architecture, social work, and so on architecture and interactive multimedia and design will be able to tell you more about the portfolios and what we'll be looking for from your students. And finally, on November 27th, our Department of Housing will be able to give you a great update on the housing and residence experience here at Carleton. Okay, so there's a couple of questions in the chat. So Dan asks, where students have completed all of the requirements for a program by the end of quadmester 1, are you admitting students for January 2021? So if students are done their requirements, can they get in January of 2021?
So yes, short answer is yes. In fact, actually, this is one of the silver linings of the quadmester system, because in the past, if students were finishing off a couple of requirements in fall, let's say this coming fall, they wouldn't be graded until February 2021. And so they actually wouldn't be eligible to be admitted for January 2021. But because of the way the quadmester system is working, students are eligible to be admitted for January 2021 when they're in this situation, when they're finishing a couple of requirements for their program. The only thing to remember is that they will only be able to apply for things that are actually open for winter. And so we don't have a full complement of things open for winter. And maybe, Carly, I'll get you to maybe put the link to the winter admission list of programs in the chat. because it's important just for them to know what is available. And so, you might have a student who has a really particular program in mind. And so in that case, it may be more worthwhile for them to wait for a fall 2021 start. So thanks for that question, Dan. That's a good one. And Stan, I'm going to go through the other ones here in the chat. So for Tamara, you're talking about, are you concerned about our students not writing final exams this year? In fact, no, we're not concerned about it at all. So there's always, so basically what we're hearing from all of the different boards is that what teachers are being encouraged to do is they're being encouraged to do a variety of different types of evaluation throughout the course that will make up the final grade to make sure that the student has achieved the learning and the learning outcomes and has the knowledge that's related to the course. And we are quite happy with that. There is, I think there's a lot of interesting talk and a lot of interesting research about the value of putting 30% of a grade on a final exam and stressing people out, and that there might actually be really good evidence to not do that and to evaluate students in different ways. So no, totally not concerned about that. The next question after that is the average for admission and for bursaries. Will they be reviewed for renewal year over year or semester over semester? Let me just talk about, I'll just talk about scholarships first. So the way our scholarships work is that we make offers with scholarship when we make the offer of admission. And so we typically do that all the way up until the April grade distribution. There's been no discussion yet about whether we will still continue to offer scholarships for the offers that we make after the July grade distribution, but that is one of the things that that's a question that we will look at. But basically the way Carleton works is, let's say we give a student an offer after the February grade distribution, and then we get grades for them in that April grade distribution, and their grade and their average goes up. In that case, we review and we will send a new increased scholarship to that student if their average has gone up so much that it increases their scholarship. And so we do review and we try to upgrade scholarships at each grade distribution if we can. And so that's in terms of awarding the scholarship. In terms of keeping the scholarship at Carleton, we review scholarships once they're here on an annual basis. And so a student, for example, starting with a scholarship in the fall of 2021 will be reviewed for that scholarship at the end of the academic year. So if they're starting in fall of 2021, they will be reviewed at the end of the academic year to see if they have the necessary 10.0 GPA and to see if they can renew their scholarship. Of course, scholarships are different than bursaries. Bursaries are awards that are given for financial need, whereas scholarships are given for academic excellence. And so that the scholarship piece is based always on average. Bursaries are based on financial need, and there is a bursary application that students can fill in as usual when they're applying for their studies, and so they can be considered for a bursary if they have financial need. So hopefully that answers all the pieces of that one. And sorry, I'm just looking through the. Okay, so there's a question here about the May 27th thing. May 20th sounds like this is not accurate. Okay, so the May 27th date is still a real thing. Basically, what they want is they need us to communicate to students in some way by May 27th. So a student has to hear from us regardless. They don't have to be accepted by that date. They don't have to be refused by that date, but they have to hear from us in some way. So by May 27th, what UAC needs is for us to either say yes, say no, or contact them and say, we need more grades in order for you to be assessed. And so this is a normal part of the application cycle and most likely will still remain for this year. So hopefully that answers that. Should international students send their grade 11 marks from their previous school back home? Do we look at these marks as well? Yes, if they do have them, it is very helpful to send them. We don't often do, for an international student, we don't often do combined averages between a grade 11 year in their school back home and their grade 12 year here, but we'll be looking at a lot more people on a case-by-case basis because of the quadmester and the octomester, and because of the way things are kind of coming in. And so it is helpful for them to send their grade 11 marks, and that's an idea of what's available for them. And if we can do a bit of a average to get additional offer, then we may be able to do that. Scholarships are here. Did I hit everything? Did I catch all those questions? I don't know if I got everything in the chat.
You did, Jen, and there's a live question from Shar. So Shar, go ahead.
Thanks. I just wanted, Jen, for you to confirm to the group, the distribution of pins this year looks very different everywhere. So UAC offered to directly mail them to students, which some schools chose that option. And then some schools are choosing to upload them themselves. And I just want you to confirm that there's no edge for a student that did that, for a school that's done that, for early offers of admission for students, because that seems to now be the big rumor for students and concern that they would be disadvantaged to be considered.
No, there's really no disadvantage. And I mean, it is so early. Like, we knew that when UAC talked to us about the pin distribution, we knew that it was going to be in a variety of different formats, but there's absolutely no disadvantage to any of that at all. Everyone seems to be on fire about this concept of, getting in early and getting the early offers. I think some students think that, if they get their application in early, it's kind of like waiting for concert tickets. Like, if they're at the head of the line, then they'll just get in first, kind of thing. But of course, that's not the way offers work. So no disadvantage one way or the other. Whatever your school or your board picked, it's fine. I mean, really, for us, as long as the student is eventually getting the pin and getting access to the application, is completely fine. Like I said before, they have until middle of January to fill in the application. And as long as they're working toward that deadline, they're fine.
All right, thank you for that question, Char. So again, the floor is still open. If there are any other questions, you can please enter it into the chat, or you can use the hands function on Teams to ask your question live. I should also mention that on October 24th and November 7th, we're going to be hosting our virtual open houses. So please encourage your students to join us on October 24th if they are interested in our Faculty of Engineering and Design or the Sprott School of Business. And on November 7th, if they're looking at our Faculty of Public Affairs, the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences, and our Faculty of Science. And we'll post a link to the open house registration in the chat. Okay, let's see here. It looks like there's another question in the chat there, Jen.
Yeah, so what day we'll be sending our first early offers. Typically, we normally start somewhere around the first week of December, sending a small number of sort of early offers. In my mind, that's kind of we're still sort of shooting for that general sort of idea. We're just making sure right now that everything, and that's really what we do with early offers typically, is just make sure everything's set up properly, make sure everything works, make sure all of our letters are kind of generating properly, and that things are working. And then when we're ready to go with all of the averages that we're using and whatnot, we normally just get started and do a small number of offers. Like I said, typically that's normally in the first week of December. And so like at this moment, that's kind of still the date that we're sort of shooting for. Yeah, so, and that's fine. If so, Sherry, in regard to the PIN numbers, even if we start making a few early offers and they don't have their PINs yet, it doesn't affect them in any way. They're not being disadvantaged at all. There's literally no There's no issues here. And we may end up delaying, when we start making our offers. It's possible that we might even go later. But there is literally no disadvantage to applying later. I mean, typically in a given year, we might start making offers in the beginning of December, but students might not apply till later in December or over the Christmas holiday or in January, and there's no disadvantage to any of that. Stuff is not filling up. People are not, we're not closing programs. So, we can assure students with 100% certainty that there is just no disadvantage if they either haven't applied or if they haven't gotten their PIN in order to apply. I know that one of the things that happens now, and this happens even when we're in real life bricks and mortar schools, like rumors get started and people start getting nervous, but we can give them 100% assurance on that.
Okay, so we'll keep this kind of conversation going with, again, an update on the events that we have coming up for you all. So I'll just kind of rhyme through those dates again. So October 23rd, the Enriched Support Program, sponsored by the Sprott School of Business. On October 30th, the Paul Menton Center, sponsored by the Faculty of Public Affairs. On November 6th, our Financial Aid Office, sponsored by the Faculty of Arts. On November 13th, our portfolio programs, and that's sponsored by the Faculty of Engineering and Design. And finally, on November 27th, our housing department, sponsored by the Faculty of Science. Now, what we're going to be doing is most likely send you all a link on a weekly basis for every upcoming guidance forum. So definitely look out for that link to be sent to you all. And of course, we invite everyone here and bring your colleagues along as well for our future events. Okay, so I guess I'll make this the kind of last call for questions. So if there are any other questions for Jen, you can please type them into the chat, or of course you can raise your hand and ask them live.
I'll get Carly to put a link for the ESL scores in the chat so that you can see what the minimum IELTS score is. For us, there is a couple of different levels. So for IELTS and TOEFL and our other language tests that we take, there's a minimum that allows them to study full time. And then if they score below those levels, and there's a sort of a chart with all of the band scores and the overall scores that are required. And if they score below those levels, for some programs, they would be eligible for an offer with an ESL requirement that would allow them to take some ESL classes and some classes related to their degree program. That option of taking some ESL classes and some classes related to their degree program isn't available for all programs, and you'll be able to see on that link which programs it is available for. But that is an option for students when they're looking at the IELTS score that they need in order to submit their score with their application.
Okay, so it looks like with that, we'll come to the end of the official portion of our event. I want to thank Jen Sugar, Carly Glantz, and the entire undergraduate recruitment team for their help. And of course, I want to thank all of you for attending our very first virtual guidance forum. If you want to continue chatting kind of, I guess, unofficially, a few of us will stay online to answer your last second questions. If not, I want to wish you all a very, very happy weekend. Stay safe, and we hope to see you next week for our conversation about the Enriched Support Program. Take care, everyone.
Hi, Jen. Oh, you can't hear me.
Yep.
Hi, Jen. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
I was a little distracted with my unmute button at the beginning, so I think I missed a portion of your explanation.
Okay.
I just want to make sure I understood correctly. So for the quadrimesters, students who will have final results in November, that will be considered rather than the grade 11 courses of last year, or how will you look at that? Because like my grade 12 students are going to get final grades as of mid-November, right? For grade 12 courses?
Yeah. Yeah. So basically what's going to happen is you're right. Whereas a student, let's say a student would have applied in the middle of November last year. At that moment, we would have only had their grade 11 grades to look at. Yeah. But this year, we're going to have 2 grade 12 courses plus their grade 11 courses. So we're going to use those 2 grade 12 courses, and then we're going to backfill with 4 other grade 11 courses. And we're going to do that in whatever combination we need to in order to kind of grab some of those prerequisite courses. And so that's really, we're looking to make an average, but we're also looking to make sure we have something to stand in for the prerequisite courses. So that's really what we'll be doing.
Okay, so it'll be the 2 grade 12 courses that they completed, and then the 4 courses from grade 11 that would kind of fill in the prerequisites.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, that's good to know. And that'll be for the first offer, which will be December, January-ish. And then in March, for the second offer, you'll be looking at the 4 grade 12 courses of the first semester like normal.
So in February, we get a distribution of grades. And so what we're going to have at that moment is, I believe what we'll have is we're going to have another 2 courses. So we're going to have the first 2 we're going to come in November, and then the second 2 will come to us in February. So at that point, we're going to have 4 grade 12, and then we'll backfill with any grade 11 that we need. And then in April, we're going to get 2 more. And then in July, we're going to get 2 more. So that's kind of, yeah. That makes sense?
Yes, it does. Perfectly. Thank you.
Great. So I see there are a couple of other people sticking around. I don't know if there are any other questions that anyone had. No. Okay.
All right. Well, then, again, everyone, have a great morning and have a great weekend. And thanks again for joining us.
Thanks all.